I mean, there was a time you talk about the '90s, and you make your nice little fun joke there, Michael, which by the way is ageism, but I'll let you get away with that.
I'm sticking with ageism. Don't you know? You could take away a lot of isms, but
okay, just go reach puberty, Michael. Then we'll talk. In any case. Just having fun with you. No, but in all seriousness, I mean, the '90s when everything was happy. Right. I don't know if you remember those times, but times were good. There was prosperity. We were moving forward socially. We were moving forward. I mean, I'm not saying everything was perfect, but there was, there was peace, right? And when you think of everything that was unleashed by the combination of the Bush presidency, the nuts that were elected to Congress in '94, 9/11, and whatever, to think where we are today, where we're sitting here, where the Republicans have taken over so many states, they've taken over both, taken over our entire legislative branch and their judicial branch in Washington. And we're sitting here and watching sort of the slow motion rolling back of common sense and science. I mean, it's worse than just specific issues.
I think that's really important to look at it systemically. And I just would add two quick things before we pivot over to this Iran debacle, which is also a manifestation of the same thing. Absolutely. Right. Absolutely. But, the two things I would mention first in terms of this kind of unraveling I would be, careful about idealizing the '90s, and I was, I was a lot, I was like a teenager at parts of it and a kid in other parts of it. So I wouldn't know fully, but I would say for me, my sort of formative experience, and I wasn't, I was definitely still a teenager. I don't remember exactly how old I was, but I was pretty politically oriented and fascinated by the world and reading and thinking about this stuff. But there was something about watching the Supreme Court give the election to George Bush that for me, in terms of my own formative experience, and I'm sure everybody experienced it in a different way, but there was just something about that was like, oh. So
this
almost
really
like is like,
because if you believed in this country, it's kind of like what happened with Watergate. Where, if you believed in this country and suddenly all what you believed in, that what you were taught in school, which is that that honesty and truth wins out, and the person with the most votes becomes president. And when you saw the lengths that this very and it's funny you brought up the unraveling, because wasn't that the great unraveling, the name of Paul Krugman's book?
Right.
And I think he was one of the first people to kind of to come straight out and say, this is we're dealing with a radical anti-democratic force. This isn't. I mean, we can call it conservatism for lack of a better word. It's not. I mean, conservatism right there in the word is conservative.
Yeah, it's really
conservative
not.
About protecting traditions and about slow change, not going through quick. These are
not
radical.
What we're dealing with.
These are people that want to go back 50 or 100 or 150 years. With nullification, the stuff they're doing most recently, where you literally have a state legislator in Texas wanting to propose a bill just saying, if all the federal courts pass forced gay marriage on us, we literally just don't have to listen. I mean, that's the stuff of the 1830s.
Yes.
We're now at a point where they want to go back 200 years. It's like they're upping the ante. Before we know it, it'll be, hey, Dark Ages, anybody? Genghis Khan? Do I hear that?
Well, he was Asian, so probably not that.
They won't like him because he was Asian, but they probably admire his work. His body of work, I'm sure, to them is very admirable. It just is. Let me be very clear, I guess, and quickly. I'm not idolizing the '90s. What I'm saying is, you're on about a 10-year path or so, if you want to know, in terms of age behind me. I was a kid in the 80s.
Right. And
so I don't remember the 80s perfectly well. I was somewhat interested in politics, but I was too young to sort of really be into it. But what I can tell you is, I read history books,
sure.
I look back, and what I do know, of course, is that the Reagan years were quite terrible for a whole lot of people.
Absolutely.
Now, since the 2000s, I also know that we have been, as like you said, once that election was stolen. I don't know if impeachment was what it was first, or that election stolen, or 9/11. All those things happening one after the other, that were shattering when you grew up sort of having a belief in this country and that the good wins out, and you're watching that. I guess what I'm saying to you is that the 90s, when you look at those other decades, the past two and the one before it, and I haven't been alive for any other ones, or old enough to understand any other ones, that the 90s seems wonderful compared to those.
I know, and point very well, and I think it's obviously a radically different thing to have a critique and a lot of problems with any number of things, and see problems in a time, though, where, there are it's a roughly positive situation in many ways. And I think obviously the 90s were that, certainly relative to this era and obviously relative to the 80s as well.